I think he had an all-time first quarter and then mediocre the rest of the way. And I think that this is a tough one to stomach for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which was, and this is tough for me to stomach, as soon as the Warriors started guarding Steph Curry like he was Steph Curry, a lot of what Wild said came to pass. He struggled. I mean, the first quarter he was great, but it was also the Celtics. I said the Warriors guarding him. Celtics obviously is what I meant by guarding him. The Celtics guarded him in the first quarter like they'd never seen him before. And because of that, he is the greatest shooter ever. And I'm giving him, I'm not trying to take anything away from what he did in the first quarter. But those were walk-in practice shots, most of them. And then after that, when they stopped dropping in the pick and roll coverage, when they started treating him with the respect that the greatest shooter ever deserves, he's 5 for 16 the rest of the way. Show the numbers of Steph's first quarter versus the rest of the game. It's across the board his impact went down. Now, Brew, I'm going to put some of this on other people. I'm going to put some of it on Draymond Green because Draymond was such a non-factor offensively that it's the reason you typically can't double team a guy is because you're leaving one guy open. But when the guy you're leaving open is Draymond Green, who cares? Like, leave him open. Doesn't matter. But the other person I'm going to put it on is Steve Kerr. Steve, you had almost a week off. It's the NBA Finals. Steph is an all-time conditioned athlete. He can play 44 minutes, man. He sat him for, I know, and I understand it's their regular rotation. Warriors fans get mad at me whenever I point this out. They're like, oh, you don't watch us play. This is how he always does it in the regular season. It's not the regular season. To sit for the first 6 minutes of the second quarter when you have just had that first quarter, I thought was too long. And to then, he sat him in the final 40 seconds of the third to steal a little bit of rest. And I know he only sat him for like 3.5 minutes in the fourth. Still felt like it was too much. Felt like you needed to get him back in immediately. Steph Curry can play 44 minutes. He certainly can play 42 minutes. So I thought Steph wasn't great after that first quarter at all. And I don't think it was an all-time performance. I thought it was an all-time quarter. But I also think his coach and his teammates could have helped him out a hell of a lot more.
Nick, it's interesting. As I'm watching this game, all right, and I was still doing my radio show, The Odd Couple, the last hour of the show when the game started. I'm watching Curry in the first quarter drain his 6 3-pointers, and I'm thinking about the comment you made yesterday where you were saying he hasn't had that iconic moment in the finals like Jordan and Kobe and all the other greats have. And I actually said it on the air. I mentioned what you said, and I said, this is his moment. And I did say this. They got to win the game and the series for it to stick. But right now, it looks like this is that iconic moment that people are going to talk about years from now. But because they didn't win, it's almost like it didn't happen. Real talk. It is almost like it didn't happen. And I got to say this. I don't want to take anything away from the 21 points. But scoring 21 points today in the first quarter and getting your team out to a big, first quarter, it isn't what it used to be. Because we obviously saw in the fourth, like leads, the game is never over. A 21-point quarter back in the day, I covered LeBron, if I remember correctly, had 21 in a playoff game against Boston in 2010. I think it was his last year in Cleveland. And the game was over. When Jordan had his first half against Portland with 35 in the first half, the game was over. Like, that's not the case anymore because of the three-point shot. Now, I think I disagree. I think you'll disagree with me on this, Nick. Had they won, even if it was barely, even if it was by the skin of their teeth, and they just held on to win that game, I do think it would have went down as his moment, at least today. Because not only did he have the first quarter, in the third quarter he had 9 points when they built the 15-point lead, and some of the moves were freakish. The behind-the-back dribble against Jaylen Brown and the Iceman finger roll. And then the up-and-under scoop shot against right, and that was the same play where he goes behind the back to shed Jaylen Brown and then does the Iceman finger roll. And then the up and under scoop shot over Derek White. So he had several moments, but because they lost Wiles in the fashion they lost in, and he was scoreless in the last 6 minutes, it looks like it was more style over substance. And that's why you can't rack it up as a great game.
Here's what I would say. And listen, I think aside from the first quarter, it was a bad game. I think that now that's not totally fair. Like overall, would I call it a bad game? No, but quarters 2 through 4, he had, to me, and aside from quarters 2 through 4, he had about a 5-minute segment where he was very good and during that stretch in the third quarter, and the rest of it, very little impact. And again, a lot of that's not on him because the spacing was so bad aside from Steph, all of that. But Wiles, I don't think they had to win. I think 2 of the most iconic finals games ever came in losses. Isaiah Thomas's 43 points, 25 and a quarter on a sprained ankle, they lost. LeBron's 51-8-8 to open the 2018 finals, the J.R. Smith game, they lost. But so Steph could have had an iconic game that they lost. He also didn't finish it off. If Steph would have finished with 45 after the 21-point first quarter, if he would have, once the Celtics took the lead in the fourth, started bringing the Warriors back, but then they lose. But it wasn't that. It was that he had 13 points on 16 shots after the first quarter. So I don't think that it's just, because they lost, it can't be an iconic game. People still bring up Jordan's 63 in a loss. Like, you have iconic losing performances. This wasn't that. This was a transcendent quarter that was a little self-inflicted by Boston. We have seen Steph be unguardable, Wiles. That wasn't what it was.
Yep.
This wasn't Steph pulling up from 36 with a hand in his face. It was Steph being like, you got to be kidding me. Do you guys not know who I am? Okay, I'll make the shot. And I give him credit for it. But a lot of that Boston did to themselves.
I 100% agree with you. And this is going to sound insulting, but it's not. Steph Curry can hit open threes. And you know what? Major League Baseball players can hit fastballs down the middle. And if Tyreek Hill gets wide open, he can catch a touchdown. It's what you're supposed to do. So Dusty and I went and charted, using laser beams and GPS technology, the 6 threes that he hit in the first quarter. One was wide open. Second one, we're describing that as the Russell Westbrook treatment. The third one, Jalen stays on Draymond Green, got to guard the backpack. Then they get a timeout. Grant Williams isn't ready for one. And then the next 2, Dusty and I described them as how you would treat a drunk, belligerent guy with cauliflower ear. Stay far, far away. That was the treatment. And here's the other thing, just to keep the boxing analogy going. That was like the way the announcers were talking about it, the way social media was going on about it. Like, oh, my God, Steph Curry, it's just on fire. You look up, Warriors were only up by 4 at the end of the first quarter. That was like an amazing boxing match, and then you look at the scorecard like, yeah, I had it 10-9. So the fact that the Celtics took all of those punches, Steph Curry, you know what, we should guard Steph Curry, comes out in the second quarter, goes 0-for. I was keeping my 23 points, prediction alive. 0-for in the second quarter, I started to feel very good. So I think this is going to be lost to history. I think it's going to be like a nice little note, but I don't think we're going to be talking about this game in 10 years, no.
No, I mean, I think I could argue it's already lost to history. I mean, it was like Nick said, it was a great quarter. That's it. And like I said, he had some great moves later in the game that I think had they won, as I said, it would have went down as one of his iconic moments. But Nick, the losses you mentioned, I mean, there were different circumstances. Isaiah scored 25 and a quarter on a bad ankle. I mean, he's limping on the court. That's why we remember it, right? You mentioned LeBron. That was 51 points, not, 34 Steph ended up with. And Jordan, obviously, with 63. So I do think they had to win unless he went for 45 or more. But that's my point. This would have been his moment had they closed it out.
No, there's 2 ways it could have been his moment.
But he didn't need.
If they had closed it out.
Right. He didn't need that many points to make it his moment.
Correct. There's 2 paths. Right. But if I'd have called you, and I would have, Brew, but you were hosting The Odd Couple evenings on Fox Sports Radio with Rob Parker, so I didn't want to bother you. If I'd have called you after the first quarter and I'd have said, I know you're not a gambling man, but I think Steph's going to finish with less than 35 points. I bet I could have gotten you to take that bet.
Oh, right.
It was inconceivable that he was going to finish in the with less than 35 points after the first quarter. Now, I do want to defend him in this regard. It is difficult for him to be effective when the Celtics are just deciding, well, we don't respect anybody else. Klay, once again, Klay, at this point, when Klay has a really good game, it's a bonus. It cannot be counted on. He can't get past anybody, and quietly, he has trouble guarding guys. Jordan Poole, I've been trying to sound this warning alarm for a few weeks now. After the hot start to the playoffs, Jordan Poole is around 14 points per game with terrible defense. Jordan Poole was unplayable last night. It basically in the second half, which is why once again, you don't have spacing there. Then all of a sudden, it's like, well, Otto Porter hit some threes. Yeah, but they're still not going to guard him like that. They're obviously not guarding Draymond. Looney's there for rebounding and defense. They're not going to guard Iguodala. So it was very adverse circumstances due to his teammates' ineffectiveness for Steph to go off. So I don't think Steph choked. I want to make this clear. And I know you can look at, the final 6 minutes of the game, he didn't score. Nobody scored. It was 17-0. So by definition, no one on his team scored. I don't think he choked, but I think he had an opportunity for a great game and to will the team to victory. And I'll say one last thing. In the third quarter, when they're building that lead, if Steph just goes for 90 seconds, lights out Steph, I think the Celtics fold their tent. If that lead gets to 18, 19, 20, and he had a couple threes, he had a couple opportunities, and he missed them.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.